Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans,
And I'm Robert Winters.
and we're continuing our romp through the neighborhood.
A romp indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you want to mention the archives that's
So
going on right now?
yeah, actually, just mention a few things that are happening this week in Fun
right.
Town,
Oh,
Cambridge.
that's true.
Yeah.
Besides the meetings.
Yeah. So, but one thing is, this is actually Open Archives Week in the city of
Yes.
Cambridge. So this is something that's not everybody's sort of in on this, or maybe even particularly interested in it. But the thing is, it's something that I'm always interested in.
Here, you can
So-
go. Why don't you show this? Because it shows you where you can
Yeah.
do it.
So the thing is
Okay.
that so for Open Archives, and they do this every summer around this time of year.
So it started yesterday, and it's only this week.
It started yesterday, yeah. So they've done it over sometimes for just 1 week, sometimes it's spread over 2 weeks.
Okay.
This is a 1 weeker this year. There is a bit of a kind of a sub-theme of social activism that you kind of see reflected in some of the displays and materials that are made available.
Oh, really? So they choose what you're going to look at? Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they
Okay.
basically put in display, but
I see.
you know. So I went to the one yesterday at the MIT Museum,
okay.
and there were a lot of materials from like circa late 60s, early 70s,
Nice.
and anti-war uprisings at MIT.
Wow.
You know, it was kind of interesting, and they had a lot of information. I wasn't there then, but I was able to provide some information they didn't
Nice.
know. So they did 2 back-to-back ones at the MIT Museum. I went to the one today at the Cambridge
Oh, you
room
went to
at
that?
the Cambridge Public Library.
Was Alyssa there?
Alyssa Pacey
Yeah.
was there. And it was really, it was a wonderful presentation about a particular family who lived in Cambridge, who had roots going back to the south of slaves. And they apparently there was a recent acquisition to the Cambridge room of the library, which really told amazing stories. And you know, so I was really fascinated by
Nice.
this. You know, so it was really great. It was also great to see our archivist there as well.
She's wonderful, yeah.
You know, I think at some point I would love to, either with Alyssa Pacey, myself, maybe I can conscript Charlie Sullivan from the Historical Commission. I was going to suggest that maybe we should do like a local walk, kind of a guided walk around Cambridge in Mount Auburn Cemetery with some of the historical figures.
But don't
Could
they already do that stuff already? You
They
do
don't
it.
do
You
that. I
did
do it here, but the thing
Yeah.
is that Alyssa has a particular interest in
Oh,
some
well,
of
there's
the
the Mount Auburn.
the
It's right there.
abolitionist movement.
Oh, yeah.
And there's an enormous amount of that theme reflected in the Mount Auburn Cemetery. So I thought that would be a really great walk to organize.
Interesting. Well,
So
talk
I'll have
to
to
her,
I'm going
yeah.
to give some thought to that.
So I'm going to go to the Cambridge Historical
And
Commission
as
tomorrow.
am
I'll
I.
see you there, 5 to 7. I did register, so you do have to
Yeah.
register.
Yeah, so I'm
But
going to
you
do
can
that
see that
one.
right here.
And I'm also doing Mount Auburn Cemetery on Thursday.
Oh, that's Thursday?
I think
Yeah.
5 o'clock. And then there's also a closing event happening over at Cambridge Community Center.
It doesn't have that on here, though.
It doesn't say it on there, but it is actually happening on Friday.
Friday, what time?
It's like 11 to 1, but I'm teaching,
Cambridge Community Center. Okay.
on Calendar Street.
Oh, yeah, I know
So
it is.
I'm
Right
a-
around the corner from me.
Yeah, so
11
I
to
asked
1.
if it'd be okay if I showed up late because I'll be teaching till 11:30,
Oh,
but I may
but I
walk
could go
over
there.
there.
I can just walk around the corner. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, that's one of the things that's happening this week, which I have a particular I'm
Yes.
thrilled by.
That's nice.
Just a reminder, come Friday, there's a couple of back-to-back things on Friday, sort of in the early part of the evening.
Oh,
I think it's like
yeah,
we're
going to go
5
back
something.
to the calendar. Okay.
Yeah. So it's around 5 something. Again, I have it on the calendar in the Civic
Yes,
Journal.
I will look at
But
this.
it's sort of I don't know if it's an unveiling or whatever, but the thing is, it's a tribute to Tom Magliazzi from the Car Talk,
Right.
Ray and Tom, who are, lived in Cambridge. Tom passed away just a few years ago.
Yeah, I don't see it here.
So they're going to do something sort of thematic around Car Talk. Remember Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe up
Oh,
there,
yeah,
right in
yeah,
Harvard
yeah.
Square.
And that's
so,
actually where they're going to be meeting, yes? I think?
yeah. So
We'll
they
try to get to that.
Yeah,
Let's
so
see
they're
what's on
doing
the
that on
calendar.
Friday, sort of in the early part of the evening, and then later in the evening, like after 7 or maybe a little earlier.
Let's just say,
is-
the dance party, of course.
Then they do the big
yes.
citywide dance party in front of
Yes,
City Hall, so they'll
of
be
course.
shutting down all of Mass
Right.
Ave from Clinton Street down to Prospect
Here
Street.
you go. If you want to go to that there.
yeah.
So and then dance party's mentioned.
Yeah, so
So
the
it's
Tom
at, the unveiling of the plaque is at 27 Brattle Street.
Right.
Is
Right,
that-
so that's
is
around
that
Brattle
where
Square. They call it the Guglielmo Plaza,
Plaza?
but it's
Okay.
basically where Brattle Street
Comes
where
into...
some of the street performers set up often.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, there'll be that kind of stuff happening in there.
Ooh, complimentary Italian supper of pasta and meatballs.
I tell you, I'm
Ooh.
going.
I'm going to be there.
Right. But then,
All right.
as that is winding down, you could just wander down Mass
That's
Ave
right.
to the dance party,
Yes.
which is, can be kind of loud and wild and whatever,
Yeah.
but it always draws a big crowd, and I
Right,
hope
and that's
I hope they get good
7
weather.
to 11 in front of
Right in front of City Hall.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice. So that's
I mean-
well. Yeah, I don't know what the weather's going to be like. I don't think it's going to rain. It's going to be hot probably. So that's good.
Yeah, it'll be wild, and
It
Holly
will be
Gettings will probably
wild.
be doing all the wonderful lighting on City Hall that she
Oh
does
right.
every
Yeah. I
year.
think I'll just go to the
Yeah.
the Ray thing.
Well, I'll hear it
Yeah.
regardless because I can
That
hear
you-
it from my house.
That's true.
It is true.
And
Yeah.
people start parking around by your house.
It's
Yes.
really true. I mean, the thing is
Yeah.
it's like the whole world's converging in there.
Well, although they may be going to the
We-
Encore, different crowd, but
That's
that
true.
all open
oh,
too.
that's
Oh
right.
my
That's right.
God.
There've already been arrests there
well, minor, but
for
yeah.
2 people for cheating at roulette and
Yeah.
4 arrests.
It's open 24 hours.
24 hours a day. Yeah. So.
I had,
So anyway, that's sort of fun thing happening around town. I probably should just because with nomination papers coming
right.
up on
Monday.
Monday, just to sort of mention, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing but spectacular has happened other than the fact that it's about to get real. So the latest, I think when we last had a program, it was before we found out that Patty Nolan
that's right.
had decided to seek election, but not to the school committee, but in
Yeah.
fact,
There we go. Yeah.
to the
right
Cambridge
there.
City
You
Council.
want to see the list of who's other than the incumbents, right?
Right, and I think maybe I'll sort of eke out a couple of other little piece of information
Oh,
about
really?
it.
You have some more?
Well,
information?
there is a little bit of rumor, to say the
Uh-oh.
least, about this.
All right.
So I'm not going to say yay or nay on this
Okay.
one here, but in addition to the all of the candidates that are now known, actually, if you click on Cambridge candidate pages, it's right at the bottom there. You can actually kind of get a visual here of who the people we know are running for city council. Right, there are, I believe, 16 candidates for the 9 seats. Curiously, there are now 6 candidates for 6 seats for school committee.
What?
So
Wait a
unless somebody else jumps in, there's no election to be had.
Yeah, but I thought there's an empty seat now.
There is, but there's also Aisha Wilson.
So this is the school committee?
Yeah, so there's a school committee.
So
we have 5 so far, and again, I don't know that everybody's running for re-election, but I'm assuming they are. And then Aisha Wilson is the
Oh, so
last
she's
candidate.
put there because if
She's a candidate.
we would have had 7 here if
Right.
Patty had stayed.
Exactly,
I see. Okay.
right. So if your
Interesting.
life's dream was to serve on the Cambridge School Committee,
should do it now.
there's only 6 candidates right
Yeah.
now for 6 seats so
Yeah.
far.
I bet people will be coming out of the way.
I'm sure there'll be others that'll
Yeah.
come, and
But
maybe
you
some
haven't
of the,
heard anything. So
and there are
far.
other candidates who've run in years past who may still come. We'll start to get some
Yeah.
indications.
Oh, okay.
Because people will be pulling papers for both city council and the school committee starting Monday.
Okay.
So and people are
Interesting.
are already using city council places and task forces to try and sort of
Well,
make their pitch.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying this to be critical, but for example, well, Adrienne Musgrave has certainly made no bones about
Yes.
her candidacy when
Right.
she's spoken at public
She also
meetings.
ran the last time. Yes.
This fellow Ben Simon
Right here from
was
EMF.
he actually got chastised at the council meeting
Yes.
last night for saying
Yeah.
so I'm running for city council, and
Yeah.
the mayor who's running for city council
Yeah.
told him you can't say that here.
Right.
Okay, and so he kind of all flustered by that.
Right.
So anyway, it's a happening.
Okay.
I'll say another thing about this though is that there are rumors afoot. I mentioned there was a person from 5th Street in Cambridge, a woman. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not, but there was a person, first name Dana. I'm not going to give the last name. Was rumored to be considering a seat. Another person who I've heard from at least one credible source is very much considering it is John Pitkin,
Huh.
which would be a
Has
pretty.
he ever run before?
John Pitkin, I believe, ran a couple times.
He did?
The first one was in 1993.
Wow.
And the only reason I know that it was when I was first a
Oh
candidate.
my goodness, that's like
Yeah.
26 years ago.
Yes, yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
like Joe Biden.
right. you know,
No, I shouldn't say that.
Um,
I'm sorry.
but I mean, there are some sort of pressing issues that are important to somebody like John, and so it doesn't shock me that
He's
a
got some
person who's
gravitas.
he's got some gravitas, and so is he or isn't he? Well, as I say, it's a pretty credible source, so we'll find out. We will find out Monday.
Monday, when can you find out? How do you get that information?
Well, what I have been doing for a
Yeah.
good number of years now is
Yeah.
only because I live down the street from the election commission.
Oh, that's where they have to go.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you pick them. The only place you can get papers is from
It's
the
from
election commission
which
office,
is
and you
right
sign.
in the annex.
You sign
Okay.
a sign-in sheet. So the thing is, so I walk down the street, and I just go there a few times,
At
and
5, or you can go at 5 o'clock, right?
I can go at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But the thing is honestly, for the first day, I mean, I'm teaching in the morning, so I'm not going to know until I get there, right? But I'll be there in the afternoon, and I'm going to say, okay, who's in? And I'm just going to, and I will be putting them up on the web and making that information available. Again, nobody's a candidate until they actually turn in the papers and have the signatures certified by the staff, and they really are in then, but they're not officially in until the election commission then verifies that and certifies that they are actual candidates. So really, historically, there have always been years where, actually every year, there are people who pull papers, possibly with the intention of running, possibly not.
But not necessarily turn them in. So
And then
you
they
can't
don't turn them in, or they turn in a few and then they go, screw it, I don't really want to do this.
And when do they have? So that's different than the money.
Right.
Establishing an account, which also you could do without running.
Right. So actually, if you go to the candidate pages, so there's a so you have to turn them in by the end of the month. So it's basically the month of July is your time for picking up papers, gathering signatures, and you only need 50 valid. But a candidate would be foolish if they in fact got turned in the bare minimum. Right.
All right. So where would this be? Under bank reports?
Just click Cambridge Candidate Pages.
Oh, just back there.
Yeah, back there. Now, if you go scroll all the way down, go all the way down.
Past the school committee?
Yeah. So after that, I actually put together a calendar that's down. They just keep going.
Oh.
Right. And see, here we go. All right. So.
Oh, here's your deadline.
Right. So there's all these various deadlines. So the deadline is actually July 31st, and I always like to put in some advice for candidates when I do this, to sort of say, this is what the minimum is, but here's what you really ought to do, and you should really you can get a copy of the database or the list of registered voters when you get your papers, and you really should be double checking to make sure people really are registered voters, because you don't want to turn in 100 signatures from out of town tourists, right? So to do that, so anyway, it's a little bit of that. Then there's plenty more that follows after that. Once everybody actually is really a candidate, that's when the real campaigns really get wild. And I don't know that anybody has scheduled any candidate forums yet. I also keep a calendar there, which I've been doing for years, to help people who are organizing candidate forums make sure they're not stomping on each other's toes, right?
Now, I see that actually they have to let them know if they're not going to.
The thing is,
they have to withdraw their nomination.
Yeah, a candidate, if a candidate turns in signatures and then, and gets certified and you're good, you're on the ballot, and then they sort of they say, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
So I think around August 16th.
It says Friday, August 16th, 5 p.m.
Yeah, so then the thing is, you can then petition and say, no, I've changed my mind.
What if they don't?
Then they're on the ballot.
That's bad.
That's it.
But that's bad because they'll take votes.
But there have been, but it's transferable votes.
That's
so if you
true,
give a number one to a candidate who's not really a candidate, it'll just go to the number two.
That's true. Well, maybe,
there was one year when Anthony Galuccio was seeking a state Senate seat, I believe, and he was kind of going to be a shoo-in, I think, for that. And then, so what happened was he let it be known that even though he was still on the municipal ballot, I think it was a special election to fill a seat.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a state rep seat. Honestly, I don't remember now. But the idea was then he let it be known that he was going to be on the council ballot, but don't vote for me, right? a lot of people did anyway because they liked them. So
Well, what, didn't Marjorie Decker miss some deadline one
Marjorie
year?
Decker actually
She was a
failed
write-in.
to turn in signatures at all. And, well, it's really, it was somebody working with her campaign failed to
Really
turn them
dropped the
in.
ball there, yeah.
The candidates, you really should just do it yourself to make
Yeah.
absolutely sure. So you don't, you should never,
Yeah.
if you have to blame somebody else
Yeah.
for failing to deliver them, then
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's on you. It's your fault.
Yeah.
But the
But-
thing
but
is,
she
so
won with a write-in
so she ran a write-in campaign, and what was curious about that year was that there were other candidates, more than one,
Yeah,
who
that
were
had
saying
write-in?
she did it on purpose because
Oh.
now she's made herself the story, and
Interesting.
and I
That's
said I
crazy.
think
I
that
don't think
that's
she did
crazy.
that on
Yeah,
purpose.
yeah, but
It's a nightmare.
candidates, especially incumbents, are. Always say it's sort of like somebody who's afraid they're not going to get asked to the prom.
Yeah.
They get very, very insecure
Yeah.
about these things, and
Yeah.
and if so, they can kind of dream up all sorts of motives that are maybe not even fair. Anyway, it'll get interesting starting next week.
It will.
So far, 8 incumbents on city council said they're running for re-election. Well, actually, they haven't said that yet. Let me just be clear. There are a couple of longtime incumbents who haven't said one way or another. It's
Right.
presumed, but we don't know.
That's true.
The only thing we do know is Jan Dever is not running.
Right.
But other than that,
Right.
you can feel free to presume the other 8 are,
That's
but it
right.
might not be true. We'll
Right.
find that out
We'll
soon
see.
enough, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a happening, right? And as I say, if you've ever dreamt of being on the school committee, you could be the 7th candidate
right.
for 6 seats. How about that?
I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So we talked a little about that city,
Yeah.
whatever,
Vacant
like that.
stores around the state.
Actually-
Let's not mention the state. That's
No. One.
rooftop mechanicals.
All right. So these are sort of smallish things,
Yeah.
but
There were orders though, right? There were
yeah.
orders.
So one of the things that happens when you sort of been around a while and followed city council affairs going back a few decades, like I have,
Yep.
is that there is almost a cyclical quality to these things. So back in the 90s, everybody wanted to do down zonings. And then in more recent years, there was a lot of up zoning because people sort of say density is good,
Yeah.
Maybe that pendulum will swing and people will say, oh, no, we got a down zone again, So things come, things go. One of the things that came, especially with the development of a lot of lab buildings, was that there were people started to get bothered by things like,
On top of the roof.
yeah, so there are certain, you permit a building for the active use part of the building, but then there's air conditioning equipment, other material, things that are up on the rooftop. And those are typically exempt from the height restrictions.
But they're not from the acoustic issues though, right?
Right. So the thing is so there's been issues about rooftop
Yeah.
mechanicals, partly because of acoustic issues, partly because of visual aesthetic issues.
You have September 2000 when it
right.
was first addressed.
Yeah. So the thing is that so it was really almost 2 decades ago that in fact there was a whole hullabaloo about this, and but they were primarily dealing with aesthetics and just sound issues, right? Things have changed since then. There was a little bit of a confusion because, all right, so the point is that right now there's I think it was Councilors Devereaux and maybe some others were kicking in to sort of say, well, we should be including some of the rooftop mechanicals into the floor area ratio or height calculations, which would basically require a smaller building to accommodate them, whatever. Apparently, some of this is being driven by issues that are happening in places like New York City right now.
Right.
Where if you build a building that's kind of sort of going up toward the top, if you build I was just speculating about this, if you wanted to put a big tower up on the top of a building, as a radio transmitter, could you call that, would that be a rooftop mechanical that would be exempt from the height limits?
It's probably not. It's not a mechanical.
Yeah, I don't think it would
I have
be.
no idea.
But the point is, what they're doing in some of these buildings in New York now, apparently, is they're actually integrating mechanicals into the floors, so you could actually have an additional 6 floors of the building that's nothing but mechanicals.
But aren't they trying to keep down but then that lessens what they can actually build as active use.
Right. But the point is that the mechanicals are not just an extra 10 feet or 20 feet on top of these buildings. So the way they're incorporating things now is somewhat different. And
But
so
who mentioned something about that a lot of the developments here are accounting for 25 feet? I heard was it McGovern?
I
Somebody
think
brought that
actually Councilor Carlone was the one who was
Oh, okay.
who was expectedly the most informed about this
Yeah,
because
he's
this
designed
is sort
this
of part of
stuff.
his
Yeah,
job,
yeah,
right? But anyway, the primary point I was going to make about this is one of those issues that comes around again, and, so it's
yeah.
around again. One of the things that I've noticed is sort of has been happening in the last decade or maybe more, is that some of these sort of more biotech lab buildings have these things built up on top where they look like giant cannons. They are actually, something having to do with air handling or exhaust systems or whatever that are really prominent features.
Yeah, but if they
And they're
take
not
away
screened
things
or
that you
anything.
shouldn't have down on the ground, that's okay.
You'd rather have them up there than elsewhere, but the
Because,
thing is, they are
private
very noticeable.
residences, you have them right next to houses. We have one right on River Street. There's 3 condensers, and you hear them coming on,
Yep.
and it's like,
No, I agree.
I'd rather than be on the roof, but it's probably more expensive for the smaller
Yeah,
property owners
I
to do
mean,
that.
I think some of these new air conditioning units are actually quieter than they were in the past. But the thing is,
Not
if
these.
it's right outside your window, it's not going to help.
Not 3 of them.
Right.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
common thing.
So I think that's one of the deficiencies where the city council hasn't really stepped up to the plate to sort of properly regulate in a way that
Oh.
sort of gives
I
best
just realized there
outcomes.
was another issue that came up a lot in public comment, the BarBQ in front of
Okay,
Formaggio.
right. So actually, that was kind of a curiosity
Yeah,
in that.
yeah.
Apparently, I think it's probably more misunderstanding because
I
the
think
proprietor
so.
actually came out and said, "Look, I'm really, really sorry. I thought
that
we'd
was
work
so
this out."
brilliant. It was so
I-
nice to see a property owner come out and say,
Basically
"Look,
said,
we'll work
"Listen,
it out."
whatever it takes to keep
Yeah.
my neighbors happy, I'm going to do
And
it."
also that it's a steam related. It's not like the wood burning stove.
So they would actually
that
want to
the-
sort of
yeah.
change from outright barbecue to more of a steam one. I kind of would prefer they be like char, but that's
No,
me.
but they were sensitive
They're
to what's
just going to
going
really
on.
be accommodating. It's really true. So it's sort of, I thought it was a
Yeah.
rather wonderful example of about how responsive
And who was there first? Some of these people who moved in
Formaggio
there probably
kitchen.
came in after Formaggio was there, but and
Yeah.
it is a business, whatever district
Yeah.
that is. What is it? A B? What do you call those? Where it's commercial.
This is like a BA one, I think,
Yeah.
or it's one of those sort of mixed residential but low
Yeah,
scale.
right.
Yeah,
right.
so it's like really more of a neighborhood setting, and
I think it'll
I don't
work
think,
out.
and again, I live in a BA1 district, and
Yeah.
the thing is, they are not the same as like Central Square or
No.
Harvard Square, whatever, and they
You
shouldn't
don't
be
really
thought
have
of
any
as
food
such.
places except for Dwelt. Is that still
That's-
there?
We
Did that
still have
go
a
away?
coffee shop, right?
That's
But the
it,
thing is,
yeah.
that things in these types of
Yeah.
business districts, they're
They're
a little bit more mom and pop scale
Yeah, mhm.
operations.
Yeah,
So it's kind of more appropriate that you would imagine they would just work it out with the neighbors.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe heavy-handed regulation isn't the way to handle those
I don't know.
places. It's just
I
more
think
like
it'll
let's
work
get
out.
along.
Yeah, but
I think
thought
it'll
that
work
was
on.
interesting. Yeah.
It's really true. One thing I thought was kind of interesting was at last night's meeting, there was this string of resolutions thanking and congratulating people who had served
Oh,
on
the
this
arts overlay.
mayor's
Yeah.
arts task force. Now there were several things you may remember that motivated that arts task force. One was just that
the
maybe,
EMF building.
but the
That's
EMF
yeah.
building in Cambridgeport and the closure of that property
That really.
and some of the
motivated me,
controversy that was coincident with some other attempts to jumpstart Central Square as a cultural district
Yeah. Oh, right.
and
yeah.
get more arts things.
Yeah.
Maybe modify zoning to permit more like artist space, live workspace or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But it turned into this task force. So it's not an official city council committee, and it had 20 some odd people on it. And I've been following it, sort of reading the meeting notes, and it's I don't envy the chair. The chair is Councilor Mallon, and I think she's done a great job shepherding this process.
Yeah.
But I really wouldn't envy anyone trying to basically sort of get people in the arts community to sort of come to some consensus about what should happen, because there's a lot of sort of just generosity, but there's also a lot of self-serving interest too. So if you're mad at Cambridge Multicultural Arts Center because your theater company didn't get renewed, you might use that opportunity to scream and yell about that. Or if you're somebody who was a musician who had rehearsal space in the EMF building, you might make a big speech as part of this arts task force, and did. So in other words, it's not always just about sort of generously trying to come up with the best outcomes.
Well,
There's
but
a
it
little
makes
bit of-
sense you're going to draw people
taking care of your
that
own.
have an active interest in their art and
Yeah,
doing it.
But in the end, what you inevitably end up with some people who are going to walk away from a process like that because they didn't get what they wanted,
Well,
or
apparently only one. Well, I don't know.
well, two actually, two
Well,
at
I
least
don't
two.
know if
Right.
it's not making it known.
Right. So anyway, so yeah, there were actually political speeches actually woven into even the task force. So there's another task force that's ongoing, which is
Tenant
one chaired by Sumbul Siddiqui.
Yeah.
It was on tenant displacement, and
Yeah, Patrick's
both
on that.
right, and both of these task forces have actually been sort of dribbling out recommendations. They didn't wait till the end. They basically
was
said,
good.
we
Yeah.
talked about this, so we're throwing some ideas in as we
Yeah.
go, which I think is actually a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, sometimes they're not fully fleshed out, and
Right.
they're not fully in context with all the other competing priorities either. So they're really just sort of being put out
It's
there as
interesting.
ideas.
Patrick brought this up last week, and he said he was the only property owner landlord, but I don't think that's true. I think Larry Field, I don't know if it's around here, but he's
But
a
you
real
know,
estate person. I mean, he knows.
right,
But he meant, I think, locally, he's
Yeah.
more known as
Yeah,
a property
yeah.
owner. Yeah.
But you know, task forces maybe are not the best way to do things. You would like to think it could be done with council committees, but sometimes it just that just doesn't fit. You
Yeah.
know, and honestly, actually, one of the recommendations they talk right now, there's one committee that has the most ridiculously long name about the neighborhood long-term planning, arts
Oh,
celebration,
I thought
and
they were
everything
gonna
under the
change
sun
that.
committee. I recommended they do. I kind of have to say that
What
you
kind
know,
of meetings have
I'm
they
not
had?
claiming authorship here, but apparently
Yeah.
one of the recommendations is that they
Yeah.
should split out the arts and celebration part out of the neighborhood and long-term
Yes.
planning, which I think is exactly what they should
Right.
do.
Yeah. Oh,
They-
that was a recommendation from the arts
I
overlay?
believe I
task
read
force?
that as some
That's
of their
good.
recommendations,
That's
you
good.
know. I mean, there, yeah, everything's intersected,
Sure.
sure, but honestly,
Yeah.
I think some of the consolidation of city council committees was really done just because people didn't
Sure.
want to have that many committees, and
Yeah.
you know,
All right, we're heading to the end of this segment, so what are we doing? Are we on next week?
maybe yeah, maybe no. The
Okay,
thing is,
because there is an important
the
meeting. Well,
affordable housing overlay thing is having
gonna have another
an
committee
ordinance committee meeting, the first of
That's
the
right.
ordinance committee
Tuesday at
meetings next
5:30.
Tuesday at 5:30. So
we'll
that may
see.
take precedence.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay,
So.
we'll let you know.
Yeah, so anyway, go
Happy
out and enjoy
dancing.
yourself.
Yes.
You guys show up at the dance party, and
Right.
we'll see you soon on
right.
Cambridge Inside Out.
Bye.